Welcome to the Nala Pickleball Podcast.
Woo! Nala Pickleball.
Here we go.
.com.
I'm Lori Burgett, your host, and with me is
Natalie Fisher, the co-hostess with the mo-hostess. What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get it.
Okay.
I think we've talked about like our goals, right?
Right.
So I want to
Goal
talk
setting.
a little bit about our goals and how we reach them. I think a lot of the, some of the women that we've talked to say, how do you get better? How do you get there? So there's a couple different roads to kind of deal with. You start off if you're brand new. My suggestion is probably to learn the sport with somebody who knows how to do it, but also I think maybe take a lesson or two. So that can probably help you prevent injury, can tell you how to do right techniques, can give you an idea of the different kind of strokes or drills that you need. You're going to get better by drilling. You're not going to get better all the time by playing rec constantly or playing with the same people all the time, even though it's recreational play. But it also depends on your goals.
Right.
So for me personally, I am hoping next year we can play in senior pros.
Senior pro.
Yeah.
So
like
we have
next time we go back to Vegas, we should play in the senior.
So we have pretty lofty goals, and again, those are just for us.
Yeah.
But there's so many, people who have different. It's like they never have played pickleball, so they want to actually learn to play pickleball.
Right.
Or they're an intermediate or an advanced beginner, and they want to become better competitive. Or there's so many different things, but it just.
But I think one of the first things you do is kind of identify if you start playing pickleball and then decide, well, maybe I want to get better. But we're coaching and working with people now. And so I think one of the first things for me is to ask people what their goals are so that I can figure out where to go. Because there's so many different places to go. And then I just, a good coach will probably just play with you a little bit and then see where you have some strengths and where you have some weaknesses and just work on maybe one or two things at a time.
Yeah.
And Natalie and I have talked about this, like how long you should actually be coaching somebody initially if they're new. You like that around the hour and a half mark, right? I think the last one I did was about 2 hours, but I'll coach and drill for a while, kind of explain things briefly, and then play a little game or gamify it at the end. So then the idea becomes, how do you pick a coach, right?
Right. Where do you go? How do you
How do you get rated? Those are
Right.
all the questions people always ask. So
yes.
If you've joined a club, which it's kind of hard now to go to a public court and play in public courts all the time.
People get intimidated because they go to these public parks and there's pretty high level play.
Right.
When you go there and they have what's called a paddle system. So if you're not familiar with that, it's kind of like, they have these kind of whatever. Mm-hmm. You put your paddle in a queue.
Or in the fence.
And then you play. But anyway, I don't want to kind of get into all that, but
it can be intimidating, right?
Yeah.
But if you've joined a club, there's so many out there now.
Yes.
And they're so social and they're so fun and they have programs and they can also fit your needs for whatever goals you have. So if you want to get into like ladder leagues or team leagues or mixed doubles and get a ranking, all of those programs will help you get better. So first of all, it's about finding your ranking. I would just start off by saying I'm a beginner. Right. And then they'll have different level courts where you're playing beginners. It's always nice to play up a little bit, but don't feel bad about learning like your system and how you like to play by playing with beginners first. It's what you really want to do is try to play with people at the same level. And then if you can, play up, which helps you get better. So hopefully at your club, they're figuring out how to rank you. I know at JW, when we first got there, they just kind of started with this system. Here's a beginner, it was a lot. There was like 8 different categories.
There were different categories, but here's the thing. So a lot of people, and this can be confusing, and please don't let it be confusing if you've never played. So that you hear like duper, right? What is that? So everybody gets like a rating, and you get this duper rating, but it's kind of, it can be, you can do a self-assessment and you can self-rate, or you can get rated by a pro, or you can actually, you play tournaments, and depending on what level you enter, the people that you play, based on your results against those people that you play, that will determine your duper rating.
Right.
So
you can read about it, but duper is probably one of the most popular ones out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of controversy and changing of, like, I think with the different pickleball leagues that you can play in.
Right.
They look for different things. So just try to become accustomed to wherever you're playing locally and see what they're using. But now I think Phoenix went from maybe just having pickleball to I think there's 8 or 9
indoor pickleball facilities.
Yeah. And each one of those has different programming. You can even play for money now.
Yeah, there's a
And
lot
so
of
there's
things.
definitely a lot of different things you can get into. For Nat and me, it's always good because we want to get better to just play with people you don't know because you haven't seen their shots. If you're
Right.
playing constantly with the same people, you see how they play, the style of play, and you're
Right.
not necessarily evolving your own game. So it's
You
always
don't.
good to get out there and do a lot of that. And then maybe your club or your city has some clinics you can join and kind of get the basics down, the foundations, and they're usually less expensive because everything is about monetizing it now,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, I mean, so the last tournament that we went to, and you'll see if you become a tournament player, they have opportunities with professionals to go 3 or 4 days, and you can actually go through
Take
the
clinics
with
with
them.
the pros.
And they can be pretty pricey.
They're pricey, very pricey.
And so it's probably pretty important for you to see what you're going to get out of that. Word of mouth is really a good way to find a good coach. But it's
social
usually
media too. Like
yeah.
you go on there and there's all kinds of groups on Facebook. I know Facebook is like for old people, according to my son, or on Instagram. But yeah, there's so many different things. And again, depending on your level of play. The one thing regarding the duper really quick as just a quick little side note. So when they talk about numbers, so if you are what's considered a 5-0 player or above, at that point, that is when you can be considered a pro.
Advanced, yeah.
You can play pro level. Now, a beginner player is probably a 2.5, thereabouts. And then you kind of go up, and it's like 0.5 increments.
Right.
So a 2.5 to a 3.0, and then a 3.5 to a 3, or a 3.0 to a 3.5. And once you're getting over like a 3.5, I mean,
4.0,
it can be
starting
a
to get
pretty
advanced, yeah.
It can get pretty advanced, and especially we go to some of these tournaments, and I don't know why it is. There seem to be a lot more men that play at that level, and it can be very competitive. I mean, we watch these things, and we're
Especially when you're talking about money.
Yes.
Then I'm not so sure about the duper ratings.
Yeah.
There was a pro playing in the last one.
Yeah.
But again, don't be intimidated. It's part of the fun. Like for us, there's something to learn in losing. Because if you're playing the same people or in the same groups, you get used to what will win a point for you.
Right.
And then when you start playing with people who have a whole different evolved game, whether they're quicker or they come from a tennis background or the blasted double,
Backhand.
two-handed backhand that
Yeah.
just like shoots back. Then you just to me that's the fun of the game is like figuring out how you're supposed to counter those moves or learn new moves, and then that makes it continue to evolve, and then it's a lot more fun for me that way. I don't know if it's that fun for Natalie. She feels it.
Yes,
and I strategize.
She is a statistician. I was going to say a statistician, but she thinks about strategy and
tactics.
Yeah, she's very tactical.
Technique and tactic.
Yes,
different.
Yes, and I get out there and I feel the ball. Like I don't.
I'll look at Natalie and go, you've done that pattern 3 or 4 times. She'd be like, huh? Hit it over there. No, this is something like that. But I mean, for me, I know. I mean, Natalie has the power game and the skill that has evolved over her years of tennis and seeing the court and all that stuff. Whereas, because the game's new to me, I'm constantly like
she's a student
trying
of the
to
game.
figure out.
Yeah,
I've heard this said, and I liked it from my very first coach that I ever learned from, who was actually a good coach. Would say this is a game of chess. You are setting up opportunities. You're looking for certain things. There's patterns to behavior. And so there's some really good ones out there. And ones that I would definitely rank now knowing what I've known, because I've probably taken lessons from at least 6 or 7 different coaches, gone to several clinics. I mean, you just find somebody that you're going to, that you can understand well.
Right.
And that usually has a good reputation. So look at the reviews, and also make sure that they do not have a sorted past. That would be good. So do a little Google search.
Background check.
Because I'm not sure that's part of the requirement.
It's not. I mean, even when we got our certification, I don't think they did like a deep dive.
And I really believe that they must, because now you have more youth coming into the game. And so just kind of, that's the other kind of topic we'll have later on, is how do you research somebody to make sure that they were. Yeah. I think that's a super important part of the game for me. That just comes naturally to kind of look into that and make sure everybody's safe in a safe environment, or parents are staying around and watching, because there are a lot of youth getting into the game.
Yeah, so you want to steer clear of predators and different things. The one thing that we had talked about is, and we had this experience ourselves as women playing. There's not as many female coaches, and I know it sometimes can be somewhat intimidating. I know, like, I've had women come up to me and they want to take lessons from a woman because they're less intimidated, and then they understand because our game is different. I mean, even at the higher levels, it's a different game. I mean, how men play and women play is different. Not to say that a guy is not a great coach for a female, because that's definitely can be the case, but it's a different game a little bit. So
I've found that you just can't do the same things if you're taking a lesson from somebody who's 6'4" and can easily smack the ball, and you're trying to figure out how to make a shot happen, and you're a lot shorter and maybe not as powerful. I think women and men play the game very differently. Yeah. Which is why you see that there's just disparity even in the rankings, right?
Right.
That I've seen out there. But I mean, don't be afraid to use word of mouth. And if you're a newer player, just kind of figure out what your goals are. And there are some people who may not be the best players, but they're good coaches. And there are people who are great players,
not good coaches.
All right.
Yeah.
So just kind of go with your gut on that and try some word of mouth and what you're hearing. And hopefully there'll be something out here soon or in the future that really lays out where people's expertise in coaching is at. And the other thing is doing some of the excursions. Or the trips.
Yeah, that's a big deal
now. See
what's
there. Yeah, see what's there in terms. I think there's some things laid out for coaching or clinics, the same kind of things, and really look to see what they're doing for you. The other thing is make sure that the ratio of coach to players is low, and not like when we first started coaching, we're out there and there's 35 to 40 people.
Yeah,
and you're not even on a court. It's really just kind of figuring out how to, and that was like a city group. Go further than that, but really just look at that, and we'll try to put some tips out there on what to look
once
for.
We
in
get
terms of
rolling, we'll do that at nalapickleball.com.
All right,
but
pursue your goals and pursue your passion, and then
and hopefully pickleball brings the same joy to your life that it has brought to our life. And that's a wrap. Nala Pickleball.